not a sophisticated reader. She loves a good story. She doesn't like long descriptive passages. Curiosity is what drives her, and she loves a novel that ends with one of the characters saying, "Marry me." And the trick was to get her to fall in love with a young man who is a postmodern reader, who loves the fiction of Borges, of William Gaddis, John Bath, Cortázar, those postmodern writers I certainly love them, who cannot take for granted the frame in which of language, and are always investigating language at every sentence. And how to unite these two lovers that was the trick. To write the novel that they both would love. I wanted to write a novel that was rooted in a kind of in a fictional realism, with a story, with characters, and at the same time I wanted every postmodern trick that I could think of, but they had to be relevant, as it were, to the story itself. Henry James wrote a wonderful essay called The Art of Fiction, in which he said many, many wise things about the novel, about the art of fiction itself. And he said the very first duty of all novelists is to be interesting. Now, it sounds kind of a truism, well, okay, what's interesting? But still, I think a lot of novelists could listen to that advice. So, although Henry James is not the kind of writer that Serena would be at all interested in, at the same time she would nod her head to that advice. She says that curiosity is the thing that every reader must have. If a book doesn't make you curious to be turning the pages, you might as well go get another book. Life is short. And it's vulgar, her view. She makes no difference between Jane Austen and Jacqueline Suzanne. She thinks Valley of the Dolls is actually better than anything that Jane Austen wrote. My brother, I suppose because I'm writing a genre novel, I want someone who loves the genre too. Who loves the genre novel. So this is the common ground for them. This is what I hoped would bring them together. And for me, the trick, the MacGuffin, as Hitchcock would say, would be that they must both be in and of this novel.
And the vision that you give Sweet Tooth of England is rather bleak, with the petrol crisis, with the miners' demonstrations, with the conflict in Northern Ireland. There's no question that now Great Britain, as most of Europe, is undergoing difficult times, it's going through a dark tunnel. But I wonder if we tend to forget how critical things were not so long ago.
Yeah, I mean, in Britain in the 70s we were going through a sort of prolonged nervous breakdown and a kind of identity crisis. Everything seemed to go wrong for us. We had hopeless industrial relations, our politics was very polarized. We were going for money to the IMF in the mid-70s. And we were quite demoralized in that arena of politics. But down there with the artists, the musicians, the writers, the new journalists, we've got Tom Wolfe coming here soon. So in a way, the early 70s is really his time. Just as we're reading now all the obituaries for Lou Reed, he's a creature of the early 70s. It was tumultuous, actually, and as it's further away, coming into focus, it was really a tumultuous time. So one of the reasons I want to go back to that time was my own life. I was just beginning to publish. just meeting with friends who would remain my writing friends for the rest of my life, and really enjoying the feel of London and the music, especially poetry and the theatre, while all this crisis was going on around us. Catch something up. Its relationship to today is very hard for me to put my hand on. Then we just thought about ourselves. I mean, it was local. The world was not so connected. So it was a peculiarly British thing. We didn't really have the sense we've had with the crisis of the last 7 or 8 years, that this is a major crisis of corporate governance, of corporate irresponsibility, of a world financial system that is ruthless, that spins money for itself out of air, it seems, and can ignore, the lives of ordinary people. The thing we're in now is very hard to get your hand on. Whereas what we had was something like a family row. It was something immediate. There were faces that you could identify. Everyone had different opinions, but it was at least feasible to imagine how this might be solved. Here we have an extraordinary crisis of capital itself. And now, I don't know, I think you're still struggling with this, and we're flatlining, but we have a sense that the city in London, the financial sector, is back to business. Everything's just going on as it was before. And we now have house prices rising again at the most amazing rate, and people generating leverage out of rising house prices. All the same bubble is just beginning to grow again. Very hard to... How do you start to undo that? It's very difficult. When people are talking of, their salaries are 25, 30, 40,000 euros in a year, and yet the Christmas bonus for a hedge fund operator is in the city 3, 5, 8, 11 million euros just for Christmas. We're in an extraordinary world that is very, very far removed from the dirty fight, the up-close fights of the 70s.
And because many of your books are set in critical times, World War II, in the Cold War, the London demonstrations against the war in Iraq, or deal with critical subjects such as global warming and solar. Up to which extent do you see your books as ways of explaining yourself these sort of things, no? Or are they more an intent of offering some political or moral, statement, or both of them? They work both ways.
I think I always find these kind of questions difficult to answer directly, because I don't feel as though I choose my subject matter. I don't think, shall I now address the political something? I float around when I finish a novel, doing nothing much, sometimes for a year or so, on the assumption that I will just pursue my own interest, forget about writing. I'm quite good at not writing. I don't get anxious about not writing. I can go months on end just reading books, seeing friends, traveling, hiking, and becoming a slightly different person. And my interests then evolve. And I don't think, when I read, for example, started to read about the Cold War, I didn't think I was researching a novel. I was just following something. And it's the same with climate change. We're all in it. I've inevitably read lots of stuff on it. It just comes up just by living in the times. And so the only way I can really explain it is that I've written a number of novels about the recent past. Atonement in the mid-30s and 40s, Sheffield Beach in the early 60s, this in the 70s. And every now and then I move back into the present. But it never seems like a conscious move. I'm writing a novel in the present now. But that material had to be in the present. It's about the present. So I don't even think of myself as a political writer. I'm much more interested in the bed, the seed bed that makes politics, which is morality. And the way to explore the kind of field, the force field of feeling and thinking and behavior in which we live is to do it through individual lives. And like all novelists, I work with sentences. It's bottom up, as they say in evolutionary and in cognitive psychology. I don't think about themes ever, which is why I'm often floored by thematic questions. Of course they come up, but they rise up out of detail